All around the country, there are clinics that have really long waiting lists, and or they have waiting lists that they don't take new people on.
Yeah.
And some of them are like a year, 6 months, a year, 2 years. Even for somebody like me who's been on hormones for a long time, I sometimes cannot get health care at these places because they're like, no, we have too much of an influx. But that just points to the fact that we don't have enough health care. Yeah, all across the country, anybody who offers trans health care in any kind of level, from small clinics to hospitals, they just have these long waiting lists.
It's underfunded. It's undercared about.
Yeah, and there's not enough healthcare professionals who are making it kind of their mission to educate themselves.
They
as
don't
well.
even make the steps to do these things. Like I've talked to some of my close people in my life that are doctors and providers, and they're like, maybe I should be providing hormones, but I don't know. It just,
why not?
I'm a little nervous. And I'm just like, if you're nervous, let me just give you places to go, like, look into it. You want to study it before you do it?
Yeah.
Here you go.
Yeah.
I know exactly where to go.
Also, that's such a weak excuse because being a doctor, just like being a nurse or being a teacher, any kind of licensed profession, frankly, you have to do
training.
Education throughout your career.
Exactly.
It's not just the end point. Oh, here's your license and that's it.
Well, and
it's continuing.
Yeah, because that if it was something that they cared about, they'd be like, oh yeah, no worries, I would just retrain. It's fine. But if it's this, they're just kind of like, it's just a lot of extra steps, and it's unfortunate.
Well, there's also a lot of cisgendered men and cisgendered women who take hormones. There's no difference.
Exactly. Yeah. So.
I'm sure there's a lot of men in this community, cisgendered men, who are taking testosterone.
Oh, I know. I can't even count on my fingers just cisgendered men down here that I know that take it like legally through their doctors and everything. And I'm like, okay.
Yep.
But yeah.
Somehow you're different, or I'm different.
Yep. It's interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's finding those resources down here are few and in between, and they're hard to get people to want to educate on and learn to be able to provide those things. But when we do have those strong allies, they're so strong that it's like maybe the business that they're in won't advertise it, but they will for themselves.
Yeah. And you are bringing all those people together, it sounds like.
Yeah. So we were able to get that $2,000 from Family Health Services, which helped tremendously because this came from this small idea of, I want to help people know where the resources are, and I want to give out binders, and I want to give out like bras and breast forms, and just learning that there's a lot more into it that was originally intended. And so that $2,000
or just
went to
meeting other trans people.
Yeah. Oh my God, the networking, that event. Yeah. I came home to like 20 different friend requests and messages of being like, I didn't know that there's so many people in the community. Like, it was crazy. And
since you are this really vigorous and skilled activist, you can train up other people
in
their own communities.
Yes, and we've had so many people come up to say those things of like, what can I do? Can I help create this event in my city? I'm like, I will give you everything I need to know on that. So yeah, we were able to raise a lot of funding too from just people being like, I love this mission. What can I do to help? We were overwhelmed with volunteers even. We had over 20 volunteers that I didn't even need, that I was like, hey, thank you so much.
Have fun.
I was like, you can either go home, I don't need you anymore. And they're like, oh, I'll just sit here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, thank you guys. Like, that's awesome. And we were able to like give out over hundreds of different transition materials. So we had over 100 binders that we basically have like 5 left.
100?
Yes.
Wow.
GCTV is a great organization to get some of those from. So we were able to get donated from them because I reached out and was like,
what's GCTV?
It's a transition, like they do binders.
Okay.
So GCTV. So
it's a commercial.
Yes.
Okay.
They're made by trans people for trans people, sort of thing. So they do awesome work with like binder work. I love to
advertise that. So
yes, exactly, especially if they're trans, like by trans for trans. It's always so awesome.
Yes.
But yeah, they've done a lot of work with that. So I reached out to them to be able to like be like, hey, I want to give out binders, but I can't handle, like, that was the biggest thing, is I wanted to give out binders at first. Being a trans man, that was like the first thing that I went to, like, oh, it's a transition material, got it.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to get binders, and I was like, I can't handle request, though. I've seen organizations be like, hey, I'm going to have some here, request it, we'll ship it out to you once we get them. And like you said, those wait lists were over a year plus. We had and they would get so overwhelmed with it that they wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah.
It was just me. So I was like, I don't want to receive requests, but I want to still be able to give these things out in a way that mattered. So I let them know kind of what I was trying to do with this resource fair, and have like these centralized things to be like, hey, these are places that we can give out this transition wear at the same time, and just keep funding that and giving it out when people can make it, and if they can pay for it, they donate what they can.
There's
and if not,
so
that's
many
fine.
levels that you're dealing with here. Right, so there's the social, there's the getting the professionals together, there's getting the funders together, to continue your work. But then also you're directly aiding trans people by giving them what they need on a daily basis. I mean, there's so many levels here.
It's a reason it took over a year to plan.
Yeah. I see that.
It was really intense though, because I had to reach out personally to organizations. It was just me doing it. I had to find all of those resources and figure out where I can get these things from. And so I was able to get over 100 binders from, it was Point of Pride actually, and GCTB, because I wanted a little bit more, and GCTB was only able to provide those. So I was like, hey, I'm going to reach out to other organizations. I got Point of Pride involved, and they got me some of those binders as well. I'm trying to think. The rest of them, I realized, I'm like, from the trans female side of it, I'm like, what would be the equivalent to binders? And so I was like, breast forms are a lot of money, but hopefully if we can get some donated. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any organizations that could. So
yeah, that's kind of a big tradition to take things in and then distribute them as needed, because sometimes people will have surgery and they don't need something like that anymore. Yeah.
And so I was hoping that I can get organizations that had extras or just to donate, and I couldn't find any on the trans female side. So I turned to the community and had an overwhelming response.
Oh, really? Okay.
So, more than I thought, by even just some cisgendered people who were like, I just don't need these bras. Take them.
There you go.
So I was able to get...
And sometimes cisgendered women also have breast forms as well.
Yes. And, unfortunately, the breast forms I got were only 4, and it was all by trans women who were like, oh, I got my own. So it was easier for me to be able to, rely on some of the trans community for some of the more, intimate things like binders. But some of the other ones were a lot easier, too.
That's why it's important, too, to have kind of a diverse team of people working on a project. Because you can pull different resources, different people, you have different skills.
Exactly. And it was so interesting how much the community grew together on this, because I decided to brave it, to share it, and put it in places that I was like, I don't know how friendly this will be, but I'm going to do it. And I had obviously a lot of comments.
Well, you're obviously a firebrand. I can tell. You're very quiet, but you're also a firebrand. I can tell.
Just a little bit. Yeah,
just a little bit.
My Mars is in Aries, so I've got a lot of passion. But yeah, so I put it out there and was like, I'm going to see what I can get out there with as safely as I can. And so, had to make sure it was if we meet up, it's a public place. I brought my dog a lot for protection. It was scary, but I met up for a lot of people to get those donations. And I was able to meet a very early transitioning trans woman who was like, you're the 4th person I came out to. I wanted to donate these. And it was she was touching, and she came to the event, and I was like, you are amazing, and this big source of joy for me that I was able to be and she's like, I was lucky that my friend did the Amazon shipments thing, so where they get returns, she's like, she gave me all this trans wear I didn't need.
Oh, there you go.
And so she was like, take all of this.
So it's kind of like clearance or something.
Yeah, it was things that it was either clearance, or it was they tried it on and they're like, it didn't work, and returned it.
Okay.
And so I was shocked, because I got this huge donation from her, and then I got the community coming together to be like, fuck these bigots, and was take all my stuff.
Great.
And so we had bras and underwear. I would never take used underwear, but 90% of our donations were new. So I was just if it's a good sourced bra and you're I don't need it anymore, just throw it over.
Yeah.
And everybody went.
They're expensive too, especially the ones that have
underwiring and all the little pretty frills. Yeah.
All that.
It was interesting though, because I expected it to be just kind of take it at your own risk. It'll be Goodwill sort of thing. And people went out and just bought big boxes of things to be hey, this is new, give them to somebody.
Wow.
And I had makeup that I was able to sanitize. There is ways to sanitize used makeup. And so most of it was new too, but I did have some used makeup that I sanitized and was able to give out to trans females to be like, hey, and we actually had people at the event who were giving makeup tips to be like, let me show you how to do this. Like, let me show you how to put this on. And so we gave out so much transition material to the point, like, we had families there crying because, like, we had one person who was extremely early in their transition as well, and they were a trans masculine youth, and they were able to get their first binder ever, to the point where, like, their mom ran to me hugging and crying and was like, this is the happiest I've ever seen him. And it was so touching to be able to see that many people in our community helped, and that many people just know, like, this is an event that I want to continue. This is an event I want to see flourish, because it's so important for us to be able to get our resources in small communities where you don't know where they are.
Did you also have maybe some older people show up as well?
Oh, yeah. Oh, and matter of fact, like, I can't tell you how many different types of people came. I thought we would have a high variety of, if it was maybe trans men or trans females. Like, I was like, maybe it would be one or the other. We had the most diverse population I've ever seen in Idaho.
Okay.
And I miss diversity. So I was like, oh my God, like, this is awesome. Seeing like the amounts of people who came in and were like, hey, I'm just here for support. We had like, it's very stereotypical, but a lot of times...
Oh, so people who weren't even trans were showing up.
Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so we had...
In support.
Yeah, like some people just came to donate more items. It was like, hey, will you take some? They're clean, here you go.
Great.
Hey, what can I do to... I've made 3 different brochures up for allies to be able to take home, of basics on how to be a trans ally for one of them. The other one was basics how to be a trans ally in classrooms.
It's very difficult to be an ally because you're not part of the community. So, and people get worried, I think, of making mistakes. Because trans people are often impacted, right, by bigots, but then sometimes inadvertently by allies. So it takes some patience as well as sometimes just taking a risk.
Exactly.
And those risks are difficult.
Well, and it's even, I've noticed that a lot of allies always say, like, it's scary to ask questions. Because I'm always like, ask questions. And they're like, I'm scared. Like, I don't want to ask something wrong and hurt your feelings. And I'm like, that's valid, because there is a lot of people who can't take those questions at that point. I'm like, but that's why it's important to, like, register with them. Like, hey, do you mind if I ask this question? Yeah. And I've had people, like, I worked with this, like, little old lady who's always like, I think she was in her late 60s. She's like, I'm 60-something years old, and I'm never going to change. And she worked with me and was very, very anti-trans. And after a little while of working with her, she was like, I think you're my best friend in the office. And it was funny. It was like, she started asking questions, and, I would tell her straight up.
So she knew that you were trans?
Yes. Okay. So she started asking more questions, like, how can you do that? And, like, how does this work? And, I started kind of talking to her a lot more about it and explaining, like, and I was very upfront where I told her some of them, like, I understand why this is curiosity, like a curious question for you, but I would never ask another trans person that. So I'm like, just for the future, I'm like, this is something that I wouldn't ask you about this, so you shouldn't ask me about this.
That's right.
And there's a lot of things.
Yeah, a lot of people think it's okay to ask about trans people's genitals. Yeah. But would you ask anybody that?
Exactly. That's what I told her too, is like, that was one of the questions, and I had to kind of explain, like, I understand why you're so interested in it. I'm like, how about we talk about what surgeries are and why people get them instead of what I have? Right. And I was like, because that's going to help you understand more. So you're not questioning mine. I feel like you're just, to her, I was like, I feel like you're just questioning how that works. And she's like, well, yeah, I just don't get it. And so I'm like, okay, so don't ask me about mine. I'm like, because I wouldn't ask about yours. Yeah. I'm like, so instead of that, I'm like, why don't we research together? I'm like, Google is free. I'm like, why don't we just look it up?
Also, look up good websites with her. Yes. Right? Because they can find all kinds of crap about trans people on the internet. But a lot of it is really awful.
I've had to
anti-trans.
Yes, I've had to teach her data literacy, which is very interesting for like a 60-something-year-old to be like, "Oh, that's not a good website to use." Right. I'm like, "Yeah." Mm-hmm. But she very quickly was like, Do you know
how to use a card catalog? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So she very quickly told me, though, that, like, she's like, when you first came, I was convinced I would hate you. I was convinced we would not be friends ever, and that I don't know why. Yeah, and that's what I said. I was
said
like,
that right to your face.
Oh yeah, she was a very little feisty old woman.
Okay, all right.
She was very straightforward, and I had to learn how to take that and be like, okay, that was offensive.
Okie dokie.
That was offensive, Barb. Come on. And I was just like, okay. But she very much was like, I thought I would hate you. I thought we would never be friends. I thought I would just felt that you were not something that I could understand. And she's like, and I started to realize that like it's a lot easier than I thought it was. And it was interesting. She was like, my son is gay and I don't really talk to him, and I ended up sending him a message and being like, I have a coworker who's trans who has taught me a lot. Like she went to one of our we had a pride.
You're doing family counseling too.
Apparently. But we had like a Pride D&D night at one point, and she was like, I love D&D, and I was like, well, allies are allowed to go, and she kind of was like,
allies.
I don't know if my husband's gonna, and I was like, well, do what makes you feel safe. You don't have to go, because at this point she was learning a lot more. I was like, sure. I don't think she would like put her foot in her mouth, hopefully.
Did she consider herself as an ally at that point?
No, until she went.
Okay.
And she realized, it was funny, like I said, I just feel like people don't know who we are, because she went, and by the end of the night, she was like, I made so many friends. I had no idea, like, how easy this was. I always thought, like, people who were gay were, like, so, I don't know, not me. And she was like, and they're just normal people.
Yeah.
And she's like, I got numbers tonight. She's like, these people are like my age, some of them. And I was like, yeah, we have a diverse population. Yeah. And she's like, I didn't expect it. And she told me later, she was like, I texted my son for the first time in forever and just said, I work with somebody who's trans, and I think I've done a lot of learning. And she's like, I want to talk to you again. And like ended up inviting me to dinner with him and her. And we're like, we talked, and I was just like, oh my God. You are
such a giving person. My goodness.
It's just about education.
Okay. But you're going to a former transphobe's house with the husband, and there's you're very giving. That's very brave of you.
I think it's, I don't know. I always look at it like I don't see it as brave, because all I could think about is just like, I just exist. Like,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, people look at me and think I shouldn't exist.
You're really going beyond what a lot of people would do by doing that. I mean, that's really, you're really helping this woman in her life. That was intense.
That's the thing though, is like, I give myself the credit of I helped her, but genuinely, like, I think it was so much of herself. Like, she let herself learn on that. We're all our own individuals, like I can look at myself and be proud of myself to be like, yeah, I'm a big person on education. I love that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like, I've met people who will never change their opinion on that.
Sure. So you're willing to go the extra with her because she was.
Yeah.
And she took some steps.
Exactly. And that's why when I called her that, like an ally, it was because she was. It was at that point, she was genuinely like, she started to learn to say, is it offensive if I asked this? And I started laughing, where I was like, it's good she was asking me and not somebody who would be a lot more offended by these things. So I would tell her the truth.
And there's a reason why people are offended by these things, because some people are greatly impacted by trauma.
Yes.
By loss of their family or body problems with their bodies, whatever, disability. There's all kinds of things that can go into the mix. So questions can seem innocent.
Exactly.
And maybe they are coming from an innocent place, but nobody is obligated to answer you.
Exactly. And I told her the same thing, because like, there was many times she did offend me too, where like I've had to kind of be
even though you're very resilient.
Exactly. Where I had to kind of say, like, I know you meant well saying that. I'm like, but that hurts to hear. And she kind of was like, oh, I didn't mean that hurtfully. And I had to explain, like, why it's hurtful is because maybe, like, if I feel like I don't pass enough, I'm like, because I think one of the questions was based off of, like, manhood, of the sense of, if you feel like you look this way, like, if you feel, because for her, it was like, you look sometimes like a girl, but you also don't look like a girl. So what makes you feel safe presenting as a man? Okay, I think it was to be like, I'm a man. And I was kind of like, I know what you're asking, but at the same time, like it hurts. So I was like, like I had to explain kind of.
Also, she was coming from the outside in.
Exactly.
Whereas yours is your own validation for who you are. You're not seeking so much the validation from the outside.
Yeah.
Which is that's always like the framework that this puts it that this is put in. Like being trans is about if other people recognize you as whatever. And it's like, no, it's often just your own internal thought processes and feelings. It has nothing to do with other people.
Exactly. Well, and that's the reason it's so important to me is I'm like, like, would it be great to pass? I hate that word, but genuinely, like, it's like, would it be great to pass? Probably, yeah. But I've always been like, I'm happy being myself. Like, I make the joke that I'm like, I'm openly trans because I don't pass. And it's like, but at the same time, it's like, I would always be happy to be trans. Like I think like people are like, if you were born a male, would that make you happy? I'm like, no.
You'd be a different person.
Exactly. I'm like, I loved the fact that I was able to transition into who I really am.
Yeah. I feel like I have several lives or something.
Exactly.
Why not?
Well, and I make the joke all the time that like I was a woman, I was presenting a woman as a woman for like half of my life, and so I make the joke all the time where I'm like, I was able to understand a woman's experience a lot more than somebody who was able to just as a cis male be like, oh yeah, I see that, and so I'm like,
and you're doing important work as a trans person,
being visible to be like, this is not something that just can disappear. Like, it's one of the sayings that a lot of people ask me why I moved to Idaho out of all places. They're like, you're trans, why did you do that? And I'm like, why not? And I'm like, I don't see a reason why I have to hide myself just because I'm going to a place that maybe people don't like me. It's like, well, then you're either going to like me or hate me, and I'm okay with either. Yeah. I'm like, it's fine.
Well, I'm glad you're here because you are so bubbly and so resilient and obviously very skilled. You are a very skilled activist.
Thank you.
So this place really needs you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just interesting how so many people make it out to be that there's not queer people in small little areas, like small cities, small states, like anything like this that are typically red states.
I grew up above the Arctic Circle. Yeah. We really are everywhere.
Yeah. And it genuinely is that it's important to make these spaces safe spaces for everybody. And it's such important work to be able to have people be openly themselves in small little areas. Yeah,
and if they're stealth, that's okay too, and they still deserve resources, and
they're still openly themselves because they're just they don't have to be openly trans to be openly themselves. Right. It's about being open within yourself to be feeling safe and happy with who you are.
Yeah, and getting appropriate health care and accommodation at work, legal name change, etc. All that stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Come on, Idaho. You're a beautiful state.
Yeah, we really are. Like, there's so many beautiful little parts of Idaho. Yeah. It's like, I moved from Arizona, and like it's so inviting. And I really feel sad to have so many people be like, I'm sad that people don't want to be themselves or feel safe in a place that is so beautiful. Yeah. It's like, this is who you are, and this is your state. Yeah. We should be able to love it and not feel like we're being not accepted.
Yeah, that's why in this project I really want to talk to people like you who do live in the smaller towns. Yeah. Who do live in red states, or even live rurally on ranches or farms or homesteads or whatever, because we really are everywhere. Yeah. And we are embedded in our communities. Yeah.
It's amazing the amount of work that goes into being trans in a small town. Yeah.
I'm sure.
Like I said, I've had the experience of kind of being that in a bigger city and then moving to a small town and learning the ins and outs of safety, of like where lines are crossed, and for some people it's...
And also your fiance is a person of color. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Navigating that in red states is an interesting change. Yeah, it's definitely a culture shock, and it's one of those things that sometimes it's unfortunate, but sometimes it's like you look at it in a better light to be able to say, this is something I want to change, and that's okay. Like, you're supposed to want to change things about places you love.
Yeah.
You're supposed to want to grow and advance as a person, as a country, as a state, anything.
Yeah, you love it so much that you're willing to stay.
Yeah, and it was not something I intended to in the beginning.
Yeah, I'm surprised. When did that change occur? Because, I mean, y'all are dealing with some stuff, some really bad stuff, openly out on the street and threats. And so when did I'm imagining that you encountered that pretty immediately.
Yeah.
So what kept you here? So it's kind of a rephrasing of why did you move here? But
why did you stay here?
Yeah, what kept you here after noticing that?
My community.
Okay.
I guess.
So you just found people here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found people who have been here their entire lives and didn't have the opportunities that I had to start that transition.
Okay.
And I realized that.
So you're kind of here to be an activist in a way.
Yeah, they need us. Like, I need them in a way too. It's like, it's not just they need me. Like, I'm not doing this for myself.
Right.
Like, I'm doing this for them because I know that it's important to be able to keep living your life authentically, whatever that may mean for somebody. And it's so important to be able to see these people getting the resources to me that they needed. Like, and knowing that nobody really has done something like this, I was sad. I was like, what do you mean? This is just bringing it to you.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
And to me, like, that's why so many people are like, you're doing great work. I'm like, I'm doing the work that should have been done in the first place. Like,
well, you're doing it. You're not doing it from a place of ego.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it breaks my heart almost when, like, that's why, like, when you say these things of, like, you should be proud. I'm like, I'm proud, but not, like, of myself. I'm proud that we're able to do it in this community.
Yes.
It's not that I don't have that sense of pride of, like, wow, I could do this and, like, great job.
You're lending your skills to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not like a, look what I have done. Right. It's look what my community was able to come together and do.
And then other people are lending their skills or their money or their resources, other resources. Yeah, totally.
And it's like, look what my community was able to come together and do. Like, look what my community never had before that now they have. Like, just being visible, especially, like, we had calls to the Harriet Center upset that they were doing this thing. Like, they could have gone out on us, and all they said was just, no, we had one meeting where we just said, this is the ways to respond to people. And I was like, I brought donuts. Like, I'm so sorry. Like, I know this is common. Like, and they were like, no, like, that's their problem, not ours. Like, we're happy to have you guys. You're doing a great service. And we're just like, thank you. I love you guys.
Thank you. Love you.
I love the Harriet Center. I'm so glad we have allies in our community.
Yeah, it's so that must be such a relief after so many no's or so many instances of backpedaling that somebody is coming out for you.
Yeah. Well, they were even like, we have campus security. We have people here for you guys. Like, it was so nice to just be like, they were literally like, you guys are supported.
Yeah, you could relax.
Yeah. And it was eye-opening to realize that, like, we have to be able to find these areas that have the ability to do that and just be like, oh no, I can stand behind you. And I know that moving forward, like, that's going to be one of the biggest things I want to do is show people, like, no, we had so many booths there at the event. We had big organizations like St. Luke's, like Family Health Services, ACLU, like big, like Planned Parenthood who were there that were like, we want to show, like, look, this is not just like some of the small end places or, I guess we support trans rights. It was like, no, we had people like all of these organizations, a lot of them donated. A lot of them were like, hey, what can I do? They brought their own flags ready to go. Great. Like they were not just trans friendly, they were trans knowledgeable, which is such a light year of difference compared to what we're used to.
And being proactive in their role. Yes. Whether that's, providers of various things, healthcare, etc. Yeah.
Well, and we tried to have such a diverse thing of resources there. Like, we had Idaho abortion rights, so we made sure that they were giving away like Plan Bs if needed, condoms. We had
this is important too. These two things are very
they go hand in hand
because it's about autonomy.
Yes. And the biggest thing too is the creator and the person who was there for that booth. They're two spirits, so they were like. They're queer themselves, and they were ready to be like, no, like, it's not just like, oh, here's abortion for, a trans man who they look as a woman. It's like, no, you need this as well. Because that so often happens where it's like you're misgendered and looked at differently for being trans in healthcare. And so understanding a lot of that was so important, because we had places like, inclusive care pharmacy, where they're like, we compound all of our things here. You can get your hormones like at a lower rate. We can do sliding scale. Here you go.
Yeah, I've been using a compound pharmacy for almost 25 years.
Oh, they're amazing. I did it in Arizona, and so I was so excited to be like, oh, you guys are in Idaho? Awesome. I'm getting it from then on. They have testosterone.
It's important too, like if you have like allergies and that sort of thing.
And I've known so many trans men down here, when they do tea, that they have to change the way they do it, because they have like sesame oil is a lot of times with tea, is that when they do the shots, they can't take it because they're allergic.
Yeah.
And so having the specifics of compounding was so essential for it. I was surprised that we didn't have it at all in Idaho until basically this place for it. It was like, yeah, no, we do hormones and it's all compounded. I know that we had like a bunch of different mental health resources that were like trans knowledgeable. That was the biggest thing, is that we pushed on the idea of the difference of trans friendly and trans knowledgeable, to be like, there's a big difference between being like, I support you, I'll use your pronouns,
or you're welcome to come and be my client,
versus like somebody saying, I'm dealing with depression that is like associated with like gender dysphoria or like
discrimination.
And it's like, they know and understand the backgrounds of it, so they can help treat it properly.
Yeah, there's no explaining, there's some explaining, but it's not like, oh, you have to spend most of the time...
Explain your existence. It's explaining my issues, not my existence.
Exactly. Let's get to the actual therapy part, rather than I'm just educating
you on trans topics.
Yeah.
And a lot of these organizations, we had a lot of them that were queer based. Like there's one of them that only takes queer people, and we're like, hey, this is specifically LGBT therapy. This is not, we'll take, and their families as well, which was awesome, because I had even families come up to be like, hey, my kid is trans, I'm trying to understand how I can support them better. And it's like, hey, I have a support group. We had a lot of organizations that were just down there ready to just help people. Like I said earlier, Idaho Legal Aid, who was like, let me help with name changes, let me explain what we can do with this. We had Trans Homing Project, which was like strictly helping with housing needs for trans people.
That's a big one.
Yeah. And so especially with the discrimination rates down here, like trans people or any gender diversity is not covered under Idaho's law for discrimination. So it's much more prevalent. I'm lucky to be able to be in a place who knows I'm trans and are like, we don't care. But like a lot of people don't get that.
Right.
And so...
Yeah, and if you don't have all of these things in place, like a job, a place to live, your life just tumbles. Yeah. It just, you can lose your credit background. Yeah. You can become very poor. You could become homeless. Yep. All these things. Yeah. You can lose health care. Yeah. And so all these things are very important.
It's extremely important. And it's important to be able to know where you can go for just even regular PCPs, primary care doctors, because the biggest point of it is, I know when I didn't get to go to the doctor until I was an adult, and I was here in Idaho because my parents never took me, and it was like, as an adult, I'm like establishing my first primary care doctor, and I'm confused, and I'm trans, so I'm like, this is even worse.
I'm telling you, I'm in my 50s, and I still don't know how to kind of
complicated.
Navigate some. Yeah, you know why? Because I haven't had a lot of medical care in my life. Yeah. And I grew up in a family that was Christian Science, so my mother did not believe in doctors. Yeah. And so... Do you come from a similar kind of background? Because you're saying that you didn't have much health care until you were 18 or something.
I was more of in an abusive situation. Okay. So I didn't
have... neglectful.
Yeah, it was more neglectful. Okay. I totally understand that side of it, though, because I didn't live with my mom, but my mom was very religious. Okay. And she had those things.
So faith-based.
Faith-based was a little bit of an interesting experience transitioning.
I understand.
Yeah.
It's almost like a negation of the body. Yeah. There's a lot of issues to work through with that.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
I'm still working through it.
Yeah, and it's such a process. Being discriminated as a trans person from family, friends, society, anybody is such this long journey and process of learning to not only just love and accept yourself, but to not care what others think, and to be able to advocate for yourself in that comes up, because
all that stuff all at the same time.
Yeah, at the same time, not including any of your past traumas that may not even result to gender identity.
And
not
you
including
you have to go to a clinic for like let's say a broken wrist or something, and you have to deal with all those things.
You have to explain, like, hey, well, I'm taking testosterone, my bone density may be different, like, oh, well, you're female on here, and it's like, okay. And that whole explaining is exhausting. And so I'm going to my first primary care doctor, and I'm like, I don't know how to explain, like, I'm on testosterone. I don't know how to explain I'm trans. I don't know how to explain I still need a pap smear, but that I'm, I don't know, but I don't get my period, sort of thing. It was like...
Yeah, and you're advocating for yourself within a medical appointment.
Yeah. And it was like going to Idaho out of all places where people didn't even know what to do with that. They were like...
Do some people ever ask for being escorted? Sometimes I know that sometimes when people go for abortions, there'll be like an escort or something like that. Has that ever come up?
We've had it happen a lot with bathrooms, obviously. Okay. So I know with doctor's visits, I've had personal friends where I'm like, I'll go with you. I'll explain for you if that needs to happen. Right. But we don't have a service. Because sometimes if you're the patient, it's very difficult to advocate for yourself. If you're ill, I have to take my cis male partner to kind of sometimes be like, take me seriously. Right. And when him being a person of color in Idaho, sometimes it doesn't always match up. Right. And it's really disappointing, but it's one of those things where it's like, what can I do? All I can do is be like, I'm going to learn my rights to be like, you know what? Then I want it documented that you denied that. Yeah. And they're like, there you go. Okay. But at my first experience, I was like, not even 20. It's like interesting having to go to that doctor. And the first thing I remember is a nurse coming in and me correcting her on one of my pronouns, which at that time especially was a huge thing. Like I used to never correct. I see. And so I was kind of like, I'm going to do it. Okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Oh, it's actually he. And she was like, oh yeah, I don't believe in any of that gender nonsense, and chuckled and was like getting my blood pressure. She's saying that. Nurse? Yes. And okay. Yeah. And I was like, wait, what? No. And she's like, yeah, no, you're good. Like, totally respect you as a person, but, I'm not going to use those. And I was just like, so you don't... And I'm thinking to myself, like, so you don't actually respect me. Right. And I'm shocked. I'm like, is this normal experiences from doctors? And I got older and went to other doctors and realized, no, like, that's... They would get in serious trouble for that now. And that's only if they decide to look into it and get them in trouble. Sure. And so I was like... That's why you need what is it? Add the words. Mm-hmm. That's why that needs to be added to the Constitution of Idaho, because that was the thing is I'm like, am I even able to do anything about that? Am I just sitting here like, wow, I just got told they don't give a fuck about me. Right. And I was like, okay, great. Yeah. Well, now what am I supposed to ask? People are just lying when they say that they respect you, yet you ask them to do something and they won't do it. No. Yeah. And like finding that out was so jarring. Okay, we took a little break, and I was trying to figure out how to kind of round out this interview. We've been going a while. So what do you think? I was thinking that maybe you could talk about how people could get involved with your organization, how to support it, maybe financially or with resources. Yeah. And how just, trans or intersex or non-binary people get out in this region of the Rocky Mountain West and the boonies. Yeah, can get some help or offer their own activist help. Yeah. Something I realize I haven't been able to say actually is the organization that I'm making for this nonprofit to expand is going to be under Transaffirm is the name, and it's right now under Transaffirm, the Southern Idaho Network. Okay. Is that like an umbrella organization that gives you the legal documents or documentation? So it's kind of what it's saying on it is that like right now we're serving Southern Idaho. I really would love to expand. So it's like if sometimes they have something like the chapter of the Arizona chapter, the Idaho chapter. Sure. So right now I'm focusing on Southern Idaho because that's where I am. That's where I know a lot of the communities, and I'm able to drive out and just do this stuff myself. But I would really love to expand. So you travel to different parts of the state to do this too? I have been, yeah. Okay, all right. So I've worked with a lot of the organizations. Like I said, we've had people from all over the state come down and be able to be like, hey, I'm from Haley, I'm from Pocatello, and come down to where it was centralized in Twin Falls, the first one. But I've driven up to a lot of places to be able to communicate with them and make those resources and see what they're doing to be able to help out. Yeah. And the future is going to be doing it in multiple different the small towns. Right now, I think the next one we're planning for is probably Idaho Falls or Pocatello,
Okay.
and then Boise is another one.
Okay, so also medium size and larger cities.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So the hope is to try to hit as many smaller towns and cities that we can. Boise being on the back burner because there's so many resources there already. But yeah, what we're trying to do is be able to expand as much as possible to be able to provide resources for those who just don't have them readily available for them. So
how can people help you that are kind of watching this or have heard about your organization? Or this event that you just put on?
Yeah. So right now, what we're really asking for is funding. Since I'm able to travel for that, I need to be able to travel and get those resources out to bigger cities. I've already had in other cities outside of Twin Falls. I've had so many people ask, like, when are you doing it down in my area? And the biggest thing is funding. Is when I get the funding, I'm going down and I'm doing what I can.
So how can people do that? Is that through the umbrella organization?
So right now we have a website called transaffirm.org.
Okay.
So transaffirm.org.
Okay.
And it's basically has a lot of the information if you want to submit a resource. It has a resource list of all of these other places, and there's also a donation button on there.
Great.
So if they want to donate and if they want to get involved as a volunteer or they want to get a booth and they're in the area, they're more than welcome to.
Great. Wonderful. Yeah. And let's say a trans person wants some help.
Well, we have our resource list on there as well for anything. If they're like, I don't know where to even start, but there's also a contact form, and they're more than happy to reach out to me and like the team and just figure out if there's something specific they need. If there's something that they're like, I just have a question. What can I do with this? We are here day and night.
Yeah.
So much of it is word of mouth that I help a lot of people down here just locally. But if it's like they don't know how to get in contact with me, they've never met me before. I'm very active in the community, but if they've never met me, they don't know how to, I'm more than happy to just be like, shoot me a message.
Yeah.
And just put it on the website, put it on the Facebook page, anything, and I'll answer day or night.
And it sounds like too you're going after some grants, some funding through organizations. I wish you luck with that. I hope that people see the value in this.
Yeah.
In such a red place, in such a difficult place that you are doing, and your organization is doing so much good work. You know, you're bringing together so many organizations. Everybody is doing their best.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you need a little bit more help so that you can continue this. And I hope that people see that and you help out.
Yeah. So we're still a very new organization. We just had our first event, so we need your guys' help to be able to fund and reach out to every trans person and any allies that need those resources to be trans affirming.
Parents.
Parents, like classrooms, businesses, to medical professionals, all of these places to learn how to be trans affirming, to learn how to support trans people, and for trans people to get those resources and transition attires that they need.
Yeah. All right. I think that's a pretty good place to end there. Thank you so much. I'm very impressed with what you're doing with so few resources. You're really bringing a lot of stuff together, and you're doing it in a humble way as well. It's not about you, it's about community, right? You're helping to build community here.
Yeah.
In a very difficult place.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. And if anybody else here in, the Rocky Mountain West would like to talk to me, I would love, love, love to talk with you. It's, it's a difficult place, and I know that it's scary to talk about things, but I can also pixelate you for privacy. You don't have to be an activist. You can just talk about your own life as a trans person out here, or a parent or an ally, etc. All right. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Sweet. All right. Thank you.